So here we go. We're picking up from chapter 20, verse number 30. When we last left off, Yonatan and David decided to make a plan to figure out Shaul's intentions regarding David. Shaul was known to have spells of melancholy, and in that state, it's possible he was willing to kill or harm David. But when he was in his right mind, did he have any intention to hurt David? He had sworn not to. So one would hope that Shaul had no plans to harm David. And that was Yonatan's position. Yonatan, the son of Shaul, the king, his son said, "It can't be my father wants to hurt you." He swore not to. And if he had any plans to hurt you, he would tell me. And David says, "Trust me, I've heard from reliable sources that he has it out to get me. Even if he's not in a state of melancholy, he still wants to kill me, even when he's lucid and clear-minded." So they said, let's do a test. The test was that on the Rosh Chodesh feast, the first of the month, they traditionally sat down for a meal, and it was 2 days in a row that there would be a meal, and David's going to be absent, and they'll see how Shaul reacts. This is not such an egregious thing to be absent from the meal, and they'll know based on Shaul's reaction. If he says, okay, David's gone, no big deal, then they'll know that Shaul is not upset at David. But if Shaul were to say, or were to react angrily that David's not there, that would be a sign that he has it out for David. Lo and behold, the day comes, David is missing from the meal. So day one, Shaul doesn't say a word. Sometimes a person can become impure, and perhaps that's why David's not here. But on day two, Shaul inquires from Jonathan, "Where's David? Where's the son of Jesse?" He said in a contemptuous way, with contempt. He doesn't want to say David's name. He says, "Where's the son of Jesse?" And Jonathan says, "Oh, he said he asked me for permission to go to Beit Lechem to have a feast with his family. It's their time to have a feast." To which Shaul not only reacts angrily, which was a sign that he wants to kill David, but he says explicitly that he plans to kill David. This is where we're picking up tonight. Verse number 30. Jonathan speaks up on behalf of David. And he says, yeah, he just went to Beit Lechem. So in verse 30, it says, "Vaychar af Shaul b'Yonatan," that the anger of Shaul flared against his son, Jonathan. And he said to him, "Ben Havat Hamardut, you son of a pervertedly rebellious woman. I see that you're choosing the son of Jesse for your own shame and for the shame of your mother. You're choosing my enemy rather than choosing the side of your own father. How dare you?" And we said last time, we finished off by saying Shaul here is insulting the mother of Jonathan, who is in fact Shaul's wife, right? Why is he insulting her? So the Midrash says that he knew that she had a rebellious type of nature. When it was time for Shaul to find a wife, you recall he was from the tribe of Benjamin, and there was a time when it was forbidden for Benjamin to for people to give their daughters to the tribe of Benjamin, right after the incident in Gibeah. So the plan they devised was that the Benjaminites should go out and take wives for themselves. And Shaul was so humble and bashful, he didn't want to do that. And this woman presented herself to Shaul, which was very against the grain. People didn't do that. The mother of Jonathan, she actually came towards Saul to petition him that they should get married. And so he saw that she had a rebellious nature, right? Already before Jonathan was ever conceived, he saw that she had a rebellious nature, and he's saying, it's in the genetics. I see that you're rebellious like your mother. You're choosing my enemy over myself. And now here's where Shaul says explicitly that he has intention to kill David. He says, all the days that David is alive, you and your kingdom will not be established. And then he says, so send someone to go get David and bring him to me. Ki ben mavetu. These are the critical words. David is deserving of death. David is deserving of death. At this point, Shaul has revealed that the oath that he made not to harm David is no longer. Does that mean that he's violating his oath? Possibly. Alternatively, the art scroll I saw suggests, without a source, they're suggesting that perhaps he went to a court and had his oath nullified, which we can do. It's called the Taras Nedarim, Tarat Nedarim. You can nullify a vow that you make under certain circumstances. So perhaps Shaul went and nullified his vow not to harm David, and now he had intention to kill him despite that vow. Okay. So in any event,
the court would have accepted the nullification not to harm him, so he could murder him.
So interestingly enough, the vows, I hear your question, that shouldn't the court have David's interest in mind? But really the question of a neder, of a vow, is a very personal issue. That Shaul had when you make a vow, you are extending a prohibition of the Torah onto yourself. You're generating a new prohibition. Like if a person makes a vow not to eat peaches, suddenly, personally, for this person, it becomes a Torah prohibition to eat a peach. So when Shaul made a vow not to harm David, even if he was deserving, etc., he has created a personal prohibition for himself. And that's what he went to the court for, to remove that personal oath. Now, I wonder, it's an interesting thing to consider. Would the court that he convened have like a broader look and say, maybe we shouldn't let you annul this because it's going to be harmful to David? I wonder if the court would ever do such a thing. But in this case, they didn't. Yeah, that's an interesting point you're raising. In any event, now we've discovered that Shaul has intention to kill David. It's not just that he reacted angrily, but he said so explicitly. So now comes part 2 of the plan of David and Jonathan. They have to act in extreme secrecy because David now has a warrant of death on his head. He cannot show his face anywhere. The king's messengers are searching for him to kill him. So David has to stay in hiding. So the plan that they made, if you recall, was that Jonathan is going to secretly transfer the message to David. And the way he would do that is he'll go target practicing with his bow and arrow. And if he shoots the arrows close within range of the attendant, and then he'll just announce, come get your arrows, they're close. And that will be a sign for David that he can come close. David would be in earshot. But if Jonathan shoots the arrows further out beyond the attendant, then he'll yell out, the arrows are beyond you. Go get them. That's a sign for David to go away. And David, he couldn't communicate this directly to David because people would see and David could get in trouble. And so could Jonathan. So this is what they do. First, at the end of the meal, this is verse number 32. Jonathan spoke up to his father Shaul and said to him, why should David die? What has he done? And very dramatically, Shaul hurls his spear at his own son to strike him. As it says, Vayatel Shaul tachanit alav lehakuto, to strike him. The Gemara says that Shaul did not intend to kill Jonathan, but he wanted to harm him. He wanted to hurt him. He was very upset at his son for taking the side of David, and he hurled the spear at him. Vayeda Yehonatan, with this, Jonathan knew 100% ki chalahi me'im aviv la'amid et David. This was not just a bad mood. This is not a passing feeling of hatred. Shaul had decided clearly to kill David. So he gets up from the table angrily, and he did not eat on that second day of Rosh Chodesh, not because his father had upset him about personally trying to hit him, but rather kinetzav el David. He was sad about David's fate. This is the dear friend Jonathan. He was not concerned with his own personal issue that he just created with his father. He's concerned about the fate of David, a dear, dear friend. Vahiva Boker, so it was in the morning. Jonathan goes out to the field. This is verse number 35. Lemoed David, to the appointed time he had made with David. Right? So David is hiding nearby, and Jonathan goes out to the field. The Na'ar Katon Imo, and a young lad is with him. Perhaps it specifies that it's a Na'ar Katon, a young lad, because he wants somebody who's not going to pick up on anything suspicious. So he particularly took an attendant, which was Katon, young, to show that, so that the attendant shouldn't pick up on the secret communications. Vayomer Lanaror, and he says to his attendant, Roots metzana et achitzim, go, run, find the arrows asher anochi mored that I shoot. So the attendant goes and runs, and Yonatan intentionally fires the arrow beyond him. And the attendant comes to the arrow that Jonathan shot, and Yonatan calls to him, "Halo chetzi mimecha v'hala." The arrow is beyond you, isn't it? Right now he's yelling. He's really speaking to David. Vayikra Yonatan acharei anar, and he continues and he calls to him and he says, "Mehirach husha al ta'amod." Quickly, don't stand. So, on the surface, if anybody's watching, it looks like he's telling his attendant to hurry. But what he's communicating to David is, you're in trouble and you are in big trouble. Run, it's urgent. Right? He went beyond their sign, which was this arrow is beyond you. He said, go quickly, because Shaul is very upset and he's looking for you right now actively. So the attendant gathers the arrow and he brings him to his master. V'hanar lo yada me'uma, and as they had hoped, the attendant was not aware of anything that was going on. He didn't know the plot. However, Yonatan v'David yad'u et hadavar. Jonathan and David, they were sharing the secret here. They knew that there was a significant communication that just occurred, that Jonathan had conveyed to David to run. Appreciate over here, if you've been keeping track, in the Hebrew, Jonathan's name here the entire time has been Yehonatan, with that extra hey added, again, indicating that he's acting in a level that's beyond the normal behavior of a human being, that he's being completely selfless here in disobeying his father's will and putting himself on the line to help David. This is something that's beyond the normal behavior of a human being, and he gets the extra hey of Hashem added to his name. Throughout this entire ordeal, his name is Yehonatan, as opposed to past sections where it's flipped between regular Yonatan to Yehonatan. Here it's the entire time, every moment that he's engaged in this mission to help David, he's doing something that's superb. Okay. And now there's a little bit of a relief that Jonathan gives his vessel, he gives his stuff to the attendant, and he says, go bring it to the city, like go back. He sends him off, and David comes out of hiding. In the initial plan, they thought perhaps there'd be people around, and they wouldn't be able to speak to each other directly. But as it turned out, nobody was around in the field that day except for Jonathan and his attendant. So he says, okay, this is a good opportunity. I don't have to speak in code. Let me just send the attendant home, and I could say my goodbye to David. So he sends the attendant home, and David comes from the southern part of the rock, and he bows 3 times towards Jonathan as a symbol of humility and, I guess, appreciation, gratitude. Vayishku ish et re'ehu, and one kisses the other. This is a dramatic parting of beloved friends. They have a covenant between them to protect each other's children for generations, etc. So this is a very dramatic and emotional parting between them. Vayivku ish et re'ehu, and each one cried for his friend, or with his friend. Ad David igdil, and David cried more. David cried more. Appreciate that at this moment, when David gets the message that Shaul is planning to kill him, his entire life is changed now. He is now changed into a fugitive. He can no longer have a normal life. Until Shaul dies or somehow changes his mind, David will forever be on the run. So David understandably cries more because he realizes what's in store here for the rest of his life, or for the rest of Shaul's life. Vayomer Yonatan David, lech leshalom, go to peace. Asher nishbanu shenenu anachnu b'shem Hashem lemor, because we have both sworn in the name of God to say that God should be between us and between our offspring. And vayakum vayelach Yonatan vayelach vayonatan ba'ha'ir. David arises and leaves, and Jonathan goes to the city, and they both go their separate ways. Okay, the dramatic parting of Yehonatan and David. An interesting note here, I believe it's the Gemara in Kedushin. We have an expression, you should go in peace. go in peace. Lech beshalom. The Gemara makes a distinction between go to peace, towards peace, and lech beshalom, in peace. To a person who is alive, you say it the way that Jonathan said it to David, lech leshalom. You should go towards peace, because you're still in motion, there's still activity happening, you're still en route, and you should always in your life be pursuing peace and going towards peace. It implies that the person is still alive and still has a journey. If you say to a person, lech beshalom, that implies that the peace is already with him, there's nothing more to achieve. You'd only say that to somebody who's already passed on from this world. So regarding a deceased person, we say Yanuach beshalom am lishkavo, he's olech beshalom, he goes with peace because he's already come to his final end. Whereas if a person's alive, you say lech leshalom, you go towards peace. An interesting technical thing here, the Gemara points out, and people make this mistake in Hebrew. When they want to wish their friend goodbye, they say lech beshalom, and that's a mistake. You should say lech leshalom, and we learn that from here. Okay, that was a little side tangent, and back to our story. Okay, so now we're beginning chapter 21, Chaf Aleph. Verse number 2. Vayavo David Noveh. David comes to the city of Nov, El Achimelech HaKohen, to Achimelech, who was the Kohen, the leader in that generation. Nov, we have to appreciate now a bit of background. You recall the Jewish people at this point did not have a temple. What they had was the Mishkan, the tabernacle. It began in Gilgal when they first entered Israel. Then it went to Shiloh. But after the Philistines had captured the ark, they had destroyed the Mishkan. And when the ark was returned, it went to a place called Kiryat Ye'arim. Remember that holy city that the ark returned to, Kiryat Ye'arim. And the Mishkan, the meaning the altar, where they would bring sacrifices, etc., that was actually in a different place. The central place of service was in Nov, where David just ran to. And we have this interesting situation where for more than 2 decades, the ark, the Aron was in one place, and the Mishkan was in another place. The altar and the Mishkan, the actual tabernacle, was in one place, and the ark was in a different place. The ark remained in Kiryat Ye'arim, and the Mishkan was there. And that has halachic implications, ramifications, that a person can bring a personal sacrifice in his backyard, as we discussed several times. And it's interesting to note, every time David flees, this is the second time we see him on the run going to a location, he's always going to the holy places. Yeah, where else what's a boy to do if not go to the place where he feels the safest? So the first time he fled, he went to Shmuel and Avi's neighborhood to go learn Torah with Shmuel. And that's what they were doing. They were learning. He was sitting and learning. And the second time he's fleeing now, he goes to Nov, the center of the Jewish people at that time. It's the city of the Kohanim. That's where the Kohanim lived because they were serving in the Mishkan at that time, and they were bringing the sacrifices on behalf of the community. Although you could bring a personal sacrifice on your own private altar, the communal sacrifices still had to go to Nov. And that's where this was. That's where David ran to. And Achimelech was the Kohen. And so now we're back in the verses. Achimelech was very afraid to see David because he knows, as far as he knows, David is a great war hero. He's a high up position in the king's government, and he's here alone. That means bad news. Is he fleeing from an enemy or something? Vayoma, he says to him, Madua ta'levadecha, why are you alone? Ve'ish einitach, there's no man with you. David says to him, Hamelech tzivani davar, the king commanded me something, and he told me that no man should know about my mission. And the people who are with me, we've arranged a secret meeting place that I'll meet them over there. I can't give you any details. It's top secret information. I'm here on my own on a mission for the king. David here, for his own safety, is hiding the fact that he's fleeing from Shaul. But there's another thing here. He didn't want to speak negatively about Shaul. And if you look at the conversation in the previous chapter between Jonathan and David, both of them were in on the secret. They both knew that Shaul wanted to kill David. But in their conversation, there was no talk. There was no talk about what Saul had done or had planned to do. Why bother speaking negatively about the king? We're not going to sit here gossiping for no reason. If there's no practical purpose to talk about Shaul, then why should I utter a bad word about him? A fascinating sensitivity that even while he's on the run for his life, there's no need to speak negatively about Shaul if it's not absolutely necessary. We see that from his discussion with Jonathan, and here also there's an element of that. He didn't want to say anything negative, but probably practically it's to protect himself. So he said, "Oh, the king sent me on a secret mission, and don't worry about it." But David has been in hiding for 2 days, and he has not eaten. He's absolutely famished, extremely hungry. So David says to the Kohen Achimelech, "Ma yesh tachat yadcha?" What do you have? I want to eat. Please give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever you have. Please give me food. So the Kohen says to David, Ein lechem chol el tachat yadi. Ki im lechem kodesh yesh, im nishmeru anarim ach meisha. I don't have any unsanctified bread. I only have holy bread. This was no city of Kohanim, and Kohanim's primary source of income was the tributes and the gifts that Hashem commanded us to give them, namely truma. Anytime you have produce, you take a tithe, 2%, and you give that to the Kohen, around 2% approximately. And you give that to the Kohen, and it's actually forbidden for a non-Kohen to eat that. And the punishment for eating it is extremely severe. It's misa b'yedei shamayim, that a person is liable to death by the hands of heaven if he eats truma. So he says to him, we only have holy bread, and even if they're Kohanim, they can only eat it if they are pure, if they have not been with a woman. If they had a seminal emission, they would have to go to the mikvah, and they can only eat after nightfall. So David says to the Kohen, none of us have been, not me or my lads, which you don't see, me and my people, we have not been with women for 2 days. But you klei anarim kodesh, v'hu derech chol, and even though we've come on a mundane journey, how do they translate? On a mundane mission, yeah. Af ki hayom mikdash bakeli. We've actually gone to the mikvah and prepared ourselves to eat holy and sanctified foods. We're not going to spend too much time talking about the technical background here, but there was a pious practice where even a non-Kohen who's eating regular food, he would treat it with the strictures, with all of the laws of holy food. It was a pious practice to eat your food while you were in a pure state. And that means even though I could have my regular apples when I'm impure, the person can go to a funeral and eat, he can be with his wife and then go eat. But pious people would be careful to only eat food in a state of purity as much as they can control. And therefore, David said to him, first of all, technically we have not been with women, but also we prepared ourselves to eat holy food. It requires going to the mikveh with a special intention to eat kodesh. He says we did that, which shows that we're talking about holy spiritual people. That's a takeaway. Okay, so the Kohen gives him kodesh. So the Kohen gives him sanctified food. What David is telling, more significantly than David's response to Achimelech was, I can eat the food. Even though he's not a Kohen, David was telling him, my life is in danger. I'm so hungry that this is a case of pikuach nefesh. My life is in danger, and I'm allowed to eat. I can override the Torah prohibition and eat the truma because my life is in danger. That was his response. In the following verses, there's a question about what actually was given to David. In verse number 7, it says, Vaiten la Kohen Kodesh. The Kohen gave David sanctified food, sacred food. Ki lo hayasham lechem ki im lechem apanim hamusarim milifnei Hashem. Because the only bread that was there was the lechem apanim, which is the show bread that they would put inside of the Mishkan. It was 12 loaves that they put out every Shabbos. That was the only bread that was around, and therefore he gave him kodesh, sacred food. So there's a machlokas in the Gemara and in the Mefarshim here. Is this verse telling us that he gave David the showbreads, the lechem apanim? Or is he saying he gave him a different sacred bread because he didn't want to give him the lechem apanim, which is the only other option. What was the different sacred bread? They would have the chalos, the bread from a korban toda. There's a lot of technical details here. There's one issue here. I'll just raise the question. If he gave him the showbreads, that would mean most likely that today was Shabbos, because the showbreads should be are given to the Kohanim on Shabbos. The way it worked was they had 12 loaves every week that were baked fresh. On Shabbos, they would put the 12 fresh loaves on the table, and the 12 loaves from the previous week would be given to the Kohanim that were working that day. And on Shabbos, the Kohanim would receive the Lechem Apanim, and at least according to Rav Ovadia Bartanura, they had to be eaten on that day, on Shabbos. So if there's showbread around, that means that today was Shabbos. So we see here another reason why Achimelech was scared at the sight of David. David had traveled into town on Shabbos. So Achimelech knew that something was funny here. He had come on Shabbos, which means there's something life-threatening happening. Otherwise, he wouldn't be traveling a far distance on Shabbat. It's prohibited. It must be someone's life is in danger. So Achimelech must have sensed something. That's why he was afraid to see David. And David said, yeah, I'm on a mission for the king. Could be he was engaged in war. War is something that could be fought on Shabbos when necessary. There's a lot of technicals. I think it'll just bog us down. So let's continue in the story. Visham Ish, this was speaking of arrows, there's the arrow of Lashon Hara. And here we have somebody present who is going to cause a tremendous tragedy to occur because of his sharp tongue. While this exchange was happening, Achimelech provides bread for David. He gives him sacred bread, okay? While that was happening, Sham Ish, there was a man, Me'avdei Shaul, from the servants of Saul, Ne'etzar Lifnei Hashem, who stayed behind before God, which implies that he came with a group of people, and he must have stayed behind in the Mishkan to bring extra sacrifices, to spend extra time in that holy place. And his name was Doeg HaAdomi. His name was Doeg the Adomite. Now, Edom is from the nation of Esau. This does not mean that Doeg was from Esau. It means he was from the land of Edom. He had, for some reason, chosen to live in Edom, in the area of Edom, and that's why he was referred to as Doeg HaAdomi. Abir HaRo'im Asher LaShaul. He was the greatest of the shepherds, the chief of Shaul's shepherds. This could either mean he was a literal shepherd. It could also mean that he was the head of the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin are the leaders of the Jewish people. So to speak, they are shepherds. So he was the head of the shepherds, which means he was one of the greatest Torah scholars in the generation. He was the head of the Sanhedrin. Unfortunately, he was watching. And the pasuk is interjecting this because later Doeg is going to relay that somebody had fed the enemy of the king. He's going to tell Shaul that, hey, Achimelech fed the enemy of the king. Is going to cause a huge tragedy, which we'll learn about in the next chapter. Okay, so Doeg Adami was aware of this. Yeah, like the camera cuts to Doeg, you see him standing there, and we'll find out next chapter exactly what he's doing there and why that's significant. David says to Achimelech, he says, I need a weapon. Can you please give me a weapon? Do you have any weapons here? Now, this is a city of Kohanim. Kohanim are not warriors. They're not fighters. David says, I didn't bring any of my weapons because I was in a big rush to fulfill the king's mission. So this is very interesting, poetic. The Cohen says to him, the only sword that we have here, the only weapon in this entire city is the one that you took from Goliath. When you killed Goliath, we took his sword, David took his sword, and he deposited in what we called at the time Yerushalayim, but that meant it was the center of the Jewish people. He put it in Nov as a remembrance for the great victory that Hashem provided, that David was able to defeat Goliath. They took Goliath's sword and they put it in Nov as a reminder. So he says, you want a weapon? The only one that's around is Goliath's sword. Asher hikita be'emeka, the one that you struck down. Hinehi lutaba simla, it's wrapped in a garment. Achureha ephod, it's behind the ephod, it's behind the what do you call it? The ephod is the,
breastplate.
yeah, the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol. Im otak tikach lecha kach. If that's the one you're going to take it. Because there's none other around. I mean, if there's any other weapon around, we would give you the other one, because this one should stay here for a reminder of the miracle. But since there are none others, you should take that one. What does it mean that it was behind the breastplate of the Kohen? Either that means it was literally behind the breastplate of the Kohen, that's where it was. But there's a midrash that says that Achimelech consulted with the breastplate of the Kohen to see whether he should offer assistance to David. He asked the Urim V'Tumim, like we saw, has been used a few times to ask about Chana, to ask about who should go up to war first. Achimelech at this point consulted with the Urim V'Tumim, which I think we could appreciate why. Something's funny here. This man arrives, who should usually arrive with an entourage. He arrives alone on Shabbos, really hungry, really secretive, and he doesn't have his weapons with him. What's going on over here? Is he rebelling? Is something happening? So he asks the Urim V'Tumim, should I assist David? That's what it means. It was behind, the sword was behind the ephod, so to speak, that blocking him from receiving the sword was the permission of the ephod, which was granted. Hashem responded to Achimelech, yes, you should provide him assistance, and he gives him the sword. This is a midrash. But the simple meaning of the text is that's just where they kept the sword. Yeah. Okay. Vayomer David en kamat and eneli. There's no others like it. Give it to me. Or I should say, yeah, there's none like it. That's a good sword. I'll take it. Okay. So David arrives in the city of Nov. He gets food. He gets a sword. And then in verse 11, he gets out of there. Vayakom David vayivrach bayamahu mipnei Shaul. He gets up and he runs away from Shaul. Vayavo el Achish melech Gat. David tragically has to leave his brethren. He's on the run now. Like we say, he's a fugitive for the rest of the foreseeable future. Vayavo Achish melech Gat. He goes to Gat. Gat, you will recall, is one of the main cities of the Plishtim. And Achish is a non-Jew. He's the non-Jewish king of the city of Gat, which is tragic, right? David has to now hide amongst the enemy. Problem is, although they had no media, the one person, the one Jew that everybody knew about was the one who had killed their hero, Goliath. So as David arrives in the city, the word starts to spread, hey, isn't that the guy? Isn't that the one that struck our hero? The servants go to the king, the Philistine king, and they say to him, David melech haaretz? Isn't this David, the king of the land? They refer to him as the king. You see their impression of him, like he might as well be the Isn't this the one they sang about? That Shaul slayed 1,000 and David slayed tens of thousands? You see that this was a well-known song. The women didn't just say it once. It sounds like this was the chorus to a song. That Shaul slayed 1,000 and David tens of thousands. This is the song that got on Shaul's nerves. And even the non-Jews knew it. David overhears this. And David takes it upon his heart, and he became very afraid. He says, oh boy, I can't stick around over here. They know who I am. This is dangerous. So this is a famous scene. He begins acting strangely. Which means he changed his flavor. That's literally what it means. He acted like an insane person. He started acting weird, and he started writing on the walls, and he started drooling onto his beard. So David is feigning madness here. He's pretending to write on the walls, drooling from his beard. So yeah, so the scene is as follows. The servants come to the king. They say, oh my gosh, your enemy's here. David's here. David's here. David picks up on it, and he instantly starts acting like a crazy person, writing on walls and drooling. Vayomer Achish el Abadav. Achish says to his servants, he comes out to see this guy, the enemy. This is a crazy person. Why would you bother by bringing a crazy person? I don't need crazy people. A great line. Do I lack insane people in my presence? That you need to bring me another one? There used to be a teacher who said this to his students whenever they would act. Sergeant Meshuggah, do I need more crazy people in my life? Like, stop acting like that. Yeah. You're gonna bring me this one? To behave crazily around me. You're gonna bring this one to my house. The Radak fills in the background actually. This wasn't just like a sarcastic expression. Do I like crazy people? His wife and daughter were actually mentally insane, and they would run around his palace screaming and making strange sounds. So he said, I don't need any more craziness in my life. He's outside screaming, they're inside screaming. I don't need any of this. Like, I'm not lacking it. So like, I don't have to bring this into my house also. Interesting.
Didn't anybody recognize the sword?
Interesting question. Interesting question.
Oh, maybe. How did
Maybe
they?
he was able to conceal it.
Yeah.
Perhaps,
How did
yeah.
they keep swords? Did they have something that covered the sword, or not?
Here, it wasn't a sheath. Maybe it was a generic handle. Although it's interesting, Goliath's sword, you imagine, was much bigger than the standard one. But that's a good point. Somehow he was able to conceal it. Yeah. So we'll just finish off the chapter here. Oh, we just did. I'll just the opening verse of the next chapter is, so David fakes crazy, and then he has to leave that place. Vayelech David misham. So David leaves Vaymelet el Me'arat Adulam, and he goes to the cave of Adulam. And then people hear that he's there, and they start coming to him, which we'll pick up over there next week. Okay, so we just had this is a fascinating narrative. There's a Tehillim I wanted to share with you, but it's been we're 40 minutes in. I'll just refer you to it. This is unbelievable. Just the emotional state of David on the run for his life. His entire life has changed. His entire life has changed. He is now a fugitive, the enemy of the king, hated by his people, by the king. What kind of mood would a person like that be in? Lo and behold, we actually have a Tehillim that he composed while he was pretending to be crazy. At those moments, he composed Tehillim, chapter 34. Psalm number 34. We have the song that he sang while he was pretending to be crazy. He composed this song, which is so beautiful. I'll just put it on the screen, and then we'll say goodnight. I'm not going to hold you longer, I promise. I just want to share with you because I don't think we'll get to it next time. We'll keep going next time. So take a look here. I just have to move it up. I can see it. A song for David. Oops. How come you can't see the whole screen? There we go. When he disguised his sanity before Avimelech. Now, Avimelech is not the name of the king in this chapter. The name of the king in this chapter is Achish. However, since he was the king of the Philistines, he was called Avimelech. This was a title for all kings. Much like Paro is the title for Egyptian kings, Avimelech is a title for Plishti kings, like the Avimelech that dealt with Abraham, etc.
Does that mean Father God? Abi?
Avimelech. My father is king. My father is king. Avimelech. Yeah. My father the king, or my father is the king. Yeah.
Father King.
And he gives a song of praise to God. Hashem's praise is always in my mouth. We can appreciate what he means when he says always. Even when I'm running from Shaul because my life is in danger and I have to play crazy because the enemies also found out who I am. Yes, it's unbelievable. So I encourage you to read through this. It's just to look at his perspective on life, no matter what he was going through. The closeness that he felt to Hashem and that he was able to compose to him is a beautiful and powerful thing. Okay, and with that, we'll part ways for tonight. And pleasure learning with you all. I look forward to continuing.